PhD in economics. You were the father of Reaganomics. You were the assistant Treasury Secretary. You were in charge of all economic policy. You've been an editor at the Wall Street Journal, so you know a lot about the mainstream media. And I just wanted to first start off about how this Ukraine thing is being covered in the mainstream media, which is a huge, pivotal story with big war problems that we could have. And nobody brings up the fact that, you know, Putin's over there giving press conferences saying, you guys started this. You started this revolution. You did this. I don't hear any of that over here. Listen, I'm pro-American. I have a site called USA Watchdog, but I am also pro-truth. Bolton, the former, the UN ambassador, saying that we ought to have Ukraine and NATO. And I'm thinking to myself, do they want war? What say you?
Oh, yes, they definitely want war, of course. They wanted it ever since Reagan was president. The neocons were always saying we have to attack the Soviet Union. And Reagan said, we're not going to win anything, we're going to end it. And the neocons got where they really disliked Reagan because he wouldn't take advantage of Soviet weakness to attack them. So they're war-minded. They produce documents that nuclear war is winnable. They make statements like William Kristol's, what good are nuclear weapons if you can't use them? So they're basically crazy people. And they have determined the course of American foreign policy since the Clinton administration. But Reagan got tired of them and ran them off. But they all got back with Clinton, and we had the Serbia, Kosovo, atrocities committed by the United States and NATO. And then with George Bush, of course, they just completely controlled the show. Under Obama, they control it. You know, the neoconservatives, they're the National Security Advisor, they're the Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, who's overlooking the situation, calls the origin of the coup in Ukraine.
As they promote civic participation and good governance, all of which are preconditions for Ukraine to achieve its European aspirations. Samantha
Power, and these women are married to neocons as well. Nuland's married to Kagan. Samantha Power is married to a neocon. So it's neocon on both sides of the marriage. And
why do they want war so bad? I mean, some people say they want war to cover up the crazy economy that's going to tank, and they want to blame somebody. I mean, I brought that up offhand, and the comments were, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I thought, well, if they're trying to, you know, start a war and blame it on Russia, that plan may be working, but the rest of the plan looks completely disheveled. It looks completely amateurish. I mean, you kicked out the pro-Russian guy, which I'm not all pro-Russia, but I mean, you're in there, you know, assaulting, you know, on a border of a country that is nuclear armed. What are you doing?
Well, don't forget, Greg, the neoconservatives have been very clear about their ideology. It's an ideology of American hegemony over the world. It's really, it's like Adolf Hitler all over again. You know, the Germans are the greatest people and the chosen race, and we have the right to overrun others. And this is the argument of the neoconservatives. They don't use the Nazi language. Instead, we are said to be the exceptional people, the indispensable country. And they use these adjectives to elevate the United States above law, both its own law and international law. So it's all right if we commit war crimes by naked aggression. It's all right if we torture. It's all right if we kidnap people in foreign countries and take them to other foreign countries and torture them. This is all just part of America achieving hegemony. And notice the way we achieve hegemony in the neoconservative ideology is not by argument or reason or persuasion or anything like that. It's by force, by violence, by overthrow, by force. So they believe that the only effective force in history is violence. The neocons are all worked up to a frenzy. They've got to prevail over Russia. They've got to prevail. It's a matter of pride. It's like you're supporting your favorite football team or your favorite soccer team. And so they're out of control. And so, yes, they do. They do want war. They've wanted it for a long time, and they were frustrated by Reagan. They got some war out of Clinton in Serbia. They got war out of George Bush in Afghanistan, in Iraq. They've got war out of Obama in Libya, Afghanistan, almost Syria. In fact, he has started a war there. Pakistan, Yemen. So they thrive on war. And it's really about all they talk about. That's all they're interested in.
I mean, did they just think Russia was just going to say, oh, yeah, you can have one of our big naval bases there in the Black Sea. No problem. We're just going to step right aside. It was the same thing in Tartus, Syria, where I'm not even a military guy. And I said, they spent, $9-10 billion on this base? They're not going to walk away and say, sure, let Al-Qaeda have it. Beautiful. Are they wanting to do this to cover up the weak economy? It's teetering.
No, they want hegemony. Russia, China, Iran are in the way of American hegemony. And they want to weaken those countries and put them in a position where they can't stand up to American purposes. Look, Russia blocked them in Syria. Russia and China blocked them in Iran. They don't want to be blocked. And so what they're going to do now, they're going to bust up the Russian Federation. They'll pump money into every dissident group anywhere in the Russian Federation. They'll, just like, remember when Putin was last reelected?
Yes.
Substantial victory. We said it was fraud, he stole the election, and we set loose all the riots in Russia from the American-financed NGOs. So we've got fifth columns throughout Russia, and we fund them with money, and we support the terrorists in Chechnya. And so they are vulnerable to being disrupted by the NGOs that Washington funds. We can really bring a serious strategic threat to Russia here. We can devalue their nuclear deterrent by putting anti-ballistic missile bases in Ukraine on their border. And so when we put pressure on them, they'll have to think much harder about standing up to it, because we can we'll have the upper hand militarily. We'll be able to knock out their nuclear deterrent. They won't be able to resist our pressure. So that's the real reason for it. The agribusiness corporations want to get the Ukrainian farmlands. There are questions of, Chevron wants to get in there and frack and do energy exploration. And they want to be able to disrupt the Russian pipelines that run through Ukraine into Western Europe, so that they can get Western Europe off of dependence on Russian energy and ship them over the natural gas that we are fracking here. So it's a multi-dimensioned project. It has many American economic interests in it. When Victoria Nuland spoke at the National Press Club last December, and said that Washington had invested $5 billion in subverting the Ukraine, she was talking, her audience were all the people who will profit from looting the Ukraine. And there was a big chevron sign right there standing beside her while she spoke.
The optimism that simply didn't exist in Ukraine 20 years ago. People are of all ages, of all classes, of all walks of life, are taking ownership of their future and coming out into the streets to demand a European future. They're doing so peacefully, with great courage, and with enormous personal restraint.
So the economic part is to loot the Ukraine. But that is just the way that the neoconservatives pull all these other economic interest groups into their program of subverting Ukraine. And the reason they want to put it in the EU is so they can put NATO bases there. So the main purpose is what Bolton said, put NATO bases, which means U.S. missile bases in the Ukraine.